Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good, the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and I have no idea where this show is going to go at all today. So, with that said, I'm just going to, like how I always am, I'm joined by Rafe. So, Rafe, how are you doing today?
Zach, I am phenomenally wonderful. It is like I always say, it is a great day to be doing a podcast with you, and I am. What do I say? I'm grateful to you to be the co-host, but I'm more grateful to our listeners because without them, we'd be nothing. You can always reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. We're on Instant, Twitter, Gram, Apple, Pod, Spotify, Play. Zach, we are everywhere, Zach. We are like, okay, the other day I went to have my teeth cleaned at the dentist. Okay, and when you're done, they give you like here's a little goodie bag with stuff in there, and I opened up the toothbrush and I expected to see like Dr. Jones DDS on there, but you know what it said on the toothbrush? Listen to the buff. All right, that's what it said right on there. We are everywhere, Zach. All right, so if you are new to the podcast, welcome. We are glad you are here. Give us 4 episodes or so. We'll give you a reason to come back. Remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. And Zach, a wonderful thing happens if that happens is that I get chocolate pudding and
I get a bunch of brownies.
You do get brownies. So Zach, today is we're not sure where this is going today. I would like to say we don't have a script, but
we never have a script.
We never really have a script, but we have a Big Brain SmartHead with us today.
Yeah, so we are bringing back a guest we've had on in the past. I believe it was like episode 3 or 4, way back in the beginning, before we actually knew what we were doing. That's also up for debate. That's a story for another time. But like I said, someone who's been on before, and we're welcoming them back to talk a little bit more about what they do, things that bring them joy, and how they pursue the adventure of life in their own life. So it is my great pleasure to welcome back into the show Brian Donahue, my uncle and your brother. So Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. So last time we had you on, we made you talk about this thing. Zach, I'm in his studio today, and right next to me is the ham radio, right, that we kind of talked about last time. So I want to talk about 2 things this time. I want to talk about any ham radio-y stuff that you do that you wanted to talk about, but we ran out of time last time. That's one. And then the second thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about what you do for your day job, which is not juggling. It's actually
lighting yourself on fire.
Lighting yourself on fire like a good juggler. It is keeping babies alive during heart surgery.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll talk about radio first.
Yeah, let's do some radio. So we are recording here in spring of 2022, and there's all sorts of stuff going on around the world. And as a ham radio operator, you get to talk to people. Look, there's a map with little pins all over the world. So tell me what?
Well, one of the things I wanted to spend more time talking about last time that I think is really fun in amateur radio is it doesn't take a lot of money or equipment or power or electricity or even a lot of engineering knowledge, although it takes some, to be able to cross continents and make contacts with people in Europe or South America or Asia or sometimes even Australia from our home here in Tennessee. So just for an example, last weekend I just had some time there and I got on my radio and I just did some listening around, and I was actually able to make contact with a whole bunch of guys. Many of them in Europe. I talked to somebody in Northern Ireland. I talked to somebody in Italy. And I talked to a guy in Belarus and another one in central Poland.
Okay, wait. So you said you got up on Saturday morning and you turn on the radio spyatizer and you just start listening to what's going on around ham radio land?
Yeah. Now there There's a little more to it than that. There are different frequency bands on which you are more likely to make international contacts. So you tune into one of those, and you tune to the voice part of the frequency spectrum, and you can hear people making contacts all over the world.
Wait. So like, is it just like in the movies where you turn the little knob, it goes, and then you hear somebody talking?
Sure, it's like tuning the radio that on your commercial radio where you hear music. You tune up to 102.5 and you hear a radio station there playing jazz or whatever. Tune down a little bit more. Oh, now you hear classic rock. You turn down to 96.1 and you hear whatever, Black Sabbath, whatever. So you just hear different things all across the spectrum there because people are communicating on different frequencies.
Okay, so are there certain people on certain frequencies? Like the Eastern Europeans like to hang out in the one area, and
sometimes there's an area of the high frequency band on 20 meters that almost always has Mexican stations. Where if I listen to like this time of night, I can guarantee you I hear some guys talking in Spanish between 14,260 and 14,280. If I guarantee, or the Canadians like to hang out on 17 meters. If you go up to 18.160 or something like that, you can hear Canadians.
Wait. So why do they go?
They just have a preference. I mean, I've heard Canadians on other frequencies too, but some people just have different preferences. There's a guy I know down in Brazil. He likes to make contacts around evening time on a particular frequency, and you hear him a lot. I've probably talked to him a dozen times.
So you just go on and you just say, "Hey, how are you?" And then they're like, "Great." And you're like, "What'd you have for dinner?" Well, like, we had pork chops.
Well, you can. It's like any other friendship. I mean, if you meet somebody you don't know, what do you talk about? Well, you talk about the weather. You talk about what kind of shoes those are. Where you got your hair cut, that kind of thing. Well, in radio, you can talk about the weather if you want, or you can say, "Oh, you have a beautiful signal coming in. What kind of antenna do you have there?" And you can talk about your antenna. Wait. What kind of radio you have? How much power you're running? Those sorts of things.
So you use the radio. Mm-hmm. To talk to people around the world
about the radio. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. So
that's what it's.
Yeah.
All right. And so,
but a lot of people, you can hear a lot of conversations where people have known each other obviously for a long time. I mean, it doesn't take too long to find them. A lot of guys on certain frequencies at certain times talk to other people they know from the military or from law enforcement. Or other endeavors that they've been in together, and you can really tell that people are old friends when they're talking to each other. And every now and then they'll talk about politics, although they try to keep things pretty tame and pretty non-confrontational.
But now, you said last time after we talked that one thing that you regretted was like be able to talk about all the real good stuff, because like in emergency times when the floods come through or the Huns invade or something like that, ham radio provides a lifeline that cell towers don't, that regular phone lines won't, that broadcast radio doesn't do it. So what is it? Is that accurate? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the times when amateur radio really shines is when there are emergencies. And I think you remember last Christmas here in Nashville, there was a bomb that blew up in downtown Nashville, and it wiped out internet and phone communications for a large part, not just Nashville, but for a large part of the area. And even things like the weather radio, those weather broadcasts that keep repeating every few minutes, even that got wiped out because they're all connected on certain very high-tech sort of web systems. Well, amateur radio was actually able to fill in and do the job to supplement communications for fire and police and hospitals and emergency services like that. And amateur radio gets through, even when there's no phone, there's no internet, there's no cell phone communications. Those are the first things to go. But amateur radio does get through. And I'll give examples that most people are very aware of, things like 9/11, things like Hurricane Sandy, things like the hurricane that went through New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina. Times like that, when emergency services need to know who's alive and who isn't, where services are needed, where people are in danger, they rely on amateur radio operators to get through.
So do they like So how does that happen? So like, do they call the bat phone or something like that?
Well,
and
sort
you
of.
guys know to tune in, or
It's
what?
it's a little more complicated than that. There's an emergency coordinator for the county, and the emergency coordinator knows how to contact the amateur radio groups that are in the area. And then certain amateur radio people have volunteered to be part of the active network in case that happens. And when that happens, they get a call either through their radio or conventional means, if those are still available, and they get what's called deployed. It's kind of like military deployment, but
you just sit in your bunker.
Not necessarily. If you have a portable system, then you get in your car and you go to where they tell you to go, and you help secure communications for the people that need it. One very good example is, I think if you remember a few years ago, like 3 or 4 hurricanes rolled over Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And Puerto Rico was left without power for months. And it took a long time for that little island to recover. But what saved it was amateur radio, because not only were the amateur radio operators able to communicate across the island without any difficulty, they were actually able to communicate back to the mainland United States, and let people know what was needed, who was alive, what the damage was, all those sorts of things that are important in a crisis like that. And these amateur radio operators are used to operating in remote locations with solar power or with battery power, so they didn't need to be plugged into the power grid. So it was something I think they get far less credit than they deserve for what they did to save Puerto Rico.
Interesting. Okay, so when you were talking about that, you were talking about like that frontline ham radio people, and my brain, of course, went to like, this sounds like it could be a TV show, and then I did some quick Googling, and it kind of was a TV show. There was a TV show that came out in 2016 called Frequency, but the story of this is it involves our favorite thing, time travel. So of course it's a good idea. It is a amateur ham radioist is able to communicate with their deceased father before they pass away. So there's like this time travel solving a murder mystery TV show thing going on thanks to ham radio. So, and there's time travel. So, if it happens in a TV show, it can happen in real life.
So the ham radio guy could talk to the past?
The future.
I heard about that. I've never seen the show, but is
it still on?
Sounds like a fun story.
It was only around for 13 episodes.
Oh, that's a lot more episodes than it deserved, I think. Well, so you've never talked to the past?
No, I would need the flux capacitor to do that.
No. He could talk to the past. Like if he's on like the 26th, then he talks to someone who's on the 25th. That's technically talking to the past.
Well, yeah. So seeing how far west we are, so most of the time when you talk to people like in Europe, it's already tomorrow. You could ask them like, who won the ball game?
Time travel.
Okay. All right. So you were on last week talking to some guys in Belarus.
Yeah.
And
I communicated with a guy in Belarus and a guy in Poland. I was for a while I was interested in talking to somebody in Ukraine if I could. I've made Ukraine contacts in the past, but once the war broke out there, Ukraine put a moratorium on amateur radio communications. Most countries do that at times of war. This country did during World War I and II. And it's mainly for national security. You don't want people to unknowingly disclose information that may be useful to the enemy. So Ukraine is unable to provide amateur radio contacts with people outside of it because it's at war right now.
Yeah, all right. Well, that would do it. That would do it. So Russia's out of the equation as well.
I guess it would technically. I haven't talked to anybody in Russia either. Although Belarus certainly did contact me last weekend.
Hey, you have a little tag on Moscow. Did you talk to somebody there?
I made a contact in Moscow not too long ago. Yeah.
All right. So all those little pins are places you've talked to?
In recent past, I just have a map up here. What he's pointing to is a map in my office here that has little magnetic pins on it that I've put in interesting places that I've talked to in the last several months. This is not all my contacts. This is just some of the recent ones.
All right.
And there are some. The farthest east is Moscow. Farthest south is in central Argentina, and there's some in Mexico and Canada, etc.
Oh, that's the Del Plata River. That's where Magellan stopped there and did a thing on its Magellan thing. We learned about them. Remember Magellan, Zach?
Yeah, I do remember Magellan. What did we learn from Magellan?
Don't get involved in a land war in Asia.
Yeah,
and don't bet against a Sicilian when death is on the line. All right,
there we go.
Okay, so ham radio is what you do for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But to put the real good that you do, I mean, hemorrhage is a good thing, but when part of the thing where you seek the good and you be the good and you spread the good involves your day-to-day, your day job, and you do, if I'm correct on this, you do pediatric cardiac anesthesia.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So what did you do one of those?
Kids, heart, anesthesia. So the anesthesia for kids who have heart problems.
That's exactly right.
I speak doctor.
Yep.
You do.
Brian is just like, what did I just get into?
Yeah, I went to med school and Zach can speak doctor. All right.
Yeah. So he's absolutely right. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I didn't do any cases today, but I did yesterday.
All right. What was yesterday?
Yesterday was an operation on a little 3-day-old, and she had a very serious heart defect, and the surgeon did a very fine job, very fine repair, and the patient did really, really well afterwards.
So this is a little baby. This is a little baby.
3 days old.
3 days old, and you have. So is anesthesia for the little baby? Is that different than what you would do for like Zach?
Very different. Yeah, the little baby has a different physiology. Little baby.
It's smaller.
Yeah, it's a smaller.
Yeah, this smaller physiology.
Yeah, you got that. This little baby we weigh babies in kilograms. This baby weighed about 3.5 kilograms, which is about 7 pounds, 7.5 pounds, which is what most babies are when they're born. And so just because she's smaller and her lungs and heart are in a different stage of development, and because her liver and her metabolic pathways are at a different stage of development, these babies respond to drugs in a very different way than adults or older children do. And so we train our residents and our fellows on what those differences are and how to safely and effectively administer anesthesia to these little babies.
So like if I went in to go, I'm not planning on this, but if I had to go get heart surgery, you would. So what's the general process? You do more than just knock me out, right? And you have to do a series of things to knock me out and then keep me alive and then bring me back. And how does that differ between me and then what you would do for a little tiny baby?
Well, that answer has a lot of answers. That question has a lot of answers. First of all, anesthesia consists of achieving several goals, one of which is, as you mentioned, being knocked out. In other words, being unaware, being unconscious, not forming any memory. And as it turns out, that's one of the easiest things that there is to achieve. There are drugs that we give that are specifically aimed to make a person go to sleep. Another goal of anesthesia is to treat pain. A surgical stimulus is a very intense stimulus. A surgeon cutting on you that's a big deal. There's a lot of pain pathways that get activated. There are drugs that we have that are specifically made for the treatment of pain and to decrease the pain response of a patient and to decrease the amount of postoperative pain that they'll have. Other goals we control the patient's reflexes and their hemodynamic status. It means that's their blood pressure and their heart and lung activity. We control their respiratory function. We control their gas exchange through their lungs, and we make sure that we maintain a stable operative environment for the surgeon to do the work. So those are all the goals that we have to establish during anesthesia. Now, for a big person like you coming in for heart surgery, other than the fact that you're bigger, you would metabolize drugs a little differently than a baby would.
Like faster or
some of them faster, a lot of them slower, and you distribute your drugs a little bit differently because your body has less water per kilogram than a baby does. Babies many of the drugs that distribute into total body water distribute more in a baby than they do in a big person like you. If you were to lose blood, you could lose, probably up to half a liter of blood without a lot of trouble. Half a liter is more than a baby's blood volume, their entire blood volume. So
what is their blood volume?
In a baby, it's about 85 mils per kilogram. So in a newborn, it's about a little bit less than a can of Coke. Okay.
All the blood in a baby is about a can of Coke.
But
for me, it's how much?
If it's easier,
it's like a 2 liter, couple 2 liter bottles.
A can of beer is about the same thing. So
yeah, okay. So, yeah,
so
okay.
Now you know, right?
Just something we can all measure here. Okay, all right. So a beverage can for a baby.
Yeah.
All right. But for me, a couple 2 liter bottles?
For you, it'd be about 5.5 liters. So
2.5 2 liter bottles.
So 2.5 2 liter bottles. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's all right. So they can't lose very much. So you got to be
Yeah, you
careful.
got to be careful of that, and if blood is required, then it's the anesthesia team that takes care of administering that during the case.
All right. So
I know from previous surgeries I've had on my face mostly that when you go under for the anesthesia, it's usually through an IV or IV related thing. I don't know enough about science, so I call all things that go into my arm an IV. But it goes into your bloodstream that way. Babies, I'm not very medically versed, but I do know that their veins are harder to find because they're less developed. All those other things. So how do you get the anesthesia into their bloodstream to be able to put them under so you can do the proper things so that they can continue living and
Well,
grow up to become a productive member of society?
And well, you've already answered half the question. There are a lot of babies, if they're already in the hospital, they already have an IV line. And so we use that. If they don't already have an IV line, there are some times that we need to get one before we go to sleep, although that doesn't happen all the time. We have anesthesia gases that we use to drift babies off to sleep. We can administer the gases through a plastic mask that we put over the baby's face. And the baby breathes in and out, and they accumulate the gas in their lungs, which then goes into their blood. And if it goes into their blood, it goes up to their brain, and it renders them asleep within a minute or two. And then once they're asleep, then we can do other things like get IV access and put in other lines and put a tube in their lungs, etc.
So you mentioned 4 things. You talked about sleep, pain, reflexes, and respiration, and some other things here and there. Are there different drugs for all of those things, or is like does one drug do multiple things, or it starts doing this, but as it metabolizes, it starts doing that?
Yeah, there is no ideal anesthetic that accomplishes all those things. So each one of those each one of those goals is dealt with by either a drug or a combination of drugs. And some drugs treat more than one thing. For example, the inhaled anesthetics, they will put you to sleep. They do some attenuation of pain. They will attenuate some of the reflexes, and they will decrease your respiration. So they will do some of each of those. Some do it differently than others, but it's a combination of medications and other treatments that we use to achieve those goals.
Yeah, you said inhaled. So are these oral drugs? Are they pills? Are they things that go into the IV system that are distilled through that then the bloodstream is able to absorb? Are they...
These days, these things are what we call volatile anesthetic gases. So, for example, you're familiar with gasoline, of course, right? So gasoline is a liquid at room temperature, right? But if you have a can of gas in your garage, you take the lid off, you can smell the fumes, can't you? We have a very high-tech machine in the operating room that takes the liquid anesthetic agent and it vaporizes it into a vapor, and then carefully calibrates the amount of vapor that the patient is going to be breathing so that we can correctly administer the right amount.
Is that like an atomizer, like a mister, or is it like volatile, like actual partial pressure kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a partial pressure sort of thing. So it has it's a very complicated piece of hardware. It has has a flow chamber that bypasses the vaporizing chamber, and then there's the vaporizing chamber. And by turning the knob and adjusting it, you control the rate of flow between the bypass chamber and the vaporizing chamber, so you can adjust how much vapor goes to the patient. That was a very crude description of a machine that has undergone multiple iterations. And,
so when did they invent those? Like 1800s or like 1980?
No, the first one was invented in the 1910s. I think it's called the Oberdom inhaler, and we have one in display in the department in the kind of like the artifacts room of old things. But it actually was, for its time, it was quite sophisticated, because at the time when ether was used as an anesthetic, which did many of those things on your list there, it was a good anesthetic, except it was very difficult to control if it was just administered, open atmosphere.
So is this the kind of thing that you poured on the cloth, like in the old movies, and you put it over their face, and then
but that unfortunately is a very uncontrolled way to administer it. So
does it work?
Oh, sure it does. I mean,
it's in the movies. It's got to work.
Sure,
it's like time travel. It's in movies. It's got to be true.
But it's like I said, it's unsophisticated, and these days it's not safe because you can't control the amount of vapor the patient is receiving.
So I was just thinking if there'd be like a time travel anesthesiologist with a
sidekick.
with a ham radio and a sidekick. That's right. That would, Zach, you could go along, and then you'd always like save the you could serendipitously save the day because he was very busy doing something, but you just like, oh,
so I'm pretty sure you just described Doctor Who, but that's a different point entirely.
Yes.
Well, he's serendipitously doing stuff, and then someone else saves the day, and he gets the credit, and then he gets confused and lost and distracted again.
Oh yes, I've never watched. What's that on? Is that on
BBC? It's a British broadcasting show that's been around since like the 60s.
Do they do anesthesia?
They do time travel.
Okay, let's like the anesthesia.
And they travel in a phone booth, which is like a ham radio. So it's pretty much the same thing.
It's the same show. It's already been done. All right, so you you go. This baby's got to come in, and this baby. Why do babies have heart surgery? And I mean, we know they have heart surgery because they're problem. What happens to their hearts? And
as many of you may not know, most of the surgery that we do on small infants is because of congenital defects. Congenital means you're born with it. So babies are frequently born with heart defects. In fact, congenital heart defects are the number one major organ malformation of childhood. 1% of all babies is born with a heart defect. You probably know, in fact, I know that you know somebody who had a baby that had a heart defect, a very serious one. Mm-hmm. And that's not uncommon. 1% of all births has some type of heart defect. The good news is most of these defects, in fact, the far majority of these defects are amenable to some type of surgical or medical treatment. And we've advanced to the point now where we can treat a huge number of these patients. And
are these like valves that aren't working right?
Sometimes, yeah. Now, they belong in different classes. There are septal defects that are holes in the heart between chambers. There are defects in the outflow tracts, we call conotruncal defects, that are defects in where the blood vessels go, and transposition and those types of things, where the major vessels that come off the heart are off the wrong chambers. There are defects in sidedness. In other words, the left side is where the right side should be, and the right side is where the left side should be. That happens a lot. And the heart in those settings is very complicated.
Is that like situs inversus?
Situs inversus, yeah, sometimes associated with some very severe heart defects. And other combinations as well. So, but 1% of all births. In fact, when you work at a children's hospital, people think that you treat cancer kids, and sometimes we do. But cancer, even though it's a very important childhood disease, I don't mean to dismiss it in any way, but cancer by far is not nearly as significant of a problem for children as heart disease is. More children will die of heart disease than will even get cancer.
So okay, so the little baby is born, and there's like let's say what's a simple one? Is it like a valve? Something I don't want to say routine, because nothing's routine if it's your kid, and nothing's routine when it's a new baby. But the ones that are pretty standard, you've seen them before, been there, done that kind of thing. You pretty much know what to expect. What would that be like?
Well, probably one of the simplest ones is what we call a patent ductus arteriosus. Before a child is born in fetal life, there is a blood vessel that connects the pulmonary artery and the aorta. And the purpose of this blood vessel is to bypass the lungs, essentially. It makes the right heart the major pumping chamber of the fetus. And so the most of the fetal blood that keeps the baby alive during fetal life is pumped by the right heart out the pulmonary artery, through the ductus, and then the aorta, and then out to the rest of the body. So this blood vessel usually closes off at birth because the tissue that comprises the blood vessel is very sensitive to oxygen. And when it's exposed to oxygen, it contracts. It squeezes down and it constricts, and it becomes just a simple ligament in adult life. That's normal, but sometimes, especially in preterm babies, premature babies, the ductus remains open. And so one of the most simple operations that is done in newborn babies and young children is the closure of the ductus arteriosus. It's very simple to do, and afterwards there's reason to expect a very, very high quality of life.
So let's say you're going to do so. That's a relatively that's as easy as it gets.
As straightforward.
Yeah. Okay.
Straightforward.
But so you do it. But like if you're going to go in there and if you're working on, how do you work on a heart if it's Okay, first of all, it's a little baby heart, so it's like
it's about the size. It's smaller than a racquetball. Okay, so it's
smaller golf ball.
Not as small as a golf ball, but in between those two, I would say.
Apricot.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, so you got a heart there. Okay, do you stop the heart and put them on bypass?
I first have to clarify. I don't. The surgeon does. So the surgeons are the ones who do all those things, who handle the heart and repair it. So the surgeon, for operations where they have to stop the heart, the surgeon has to somehow find some way to take over the job of the heart and lungs, and that's taken over by what we used to call the heart-lung machine. So the surgeon places a cannula, which is a small metal tube, in the vena cava, and another cannula in the aorta, and the blood that comes back to the heart through the vena cava. Actually, there are two of them, two vena cavae. That blood goes out to the pump. The pump takes the blood and oxygenates it and pumps it back into the aorta, where it can go back to the rest of the body. So this system, like I said, takes over the job of the heart and lungs while the surgeon fixes the heart. And that's why we call it cardiopulmonary bypass. It's called the bypass circuit.
So do you have? So then you have to stop that heart somehow. You do that like little mini paddles and.
Well, that's one way to do it, but that's not the best way. Sometimes you can do that. It's called fibrillating the heart, or what's called a fibrillatory arrest. That's not the best way to do it, because when the heart's fibrillating, it's still consuming oxygen. So what you want to do is you want to make the heart completely silent, and that's done by the surgeon. He or she will place a clamp across the aorta between the inflow cannula and the heart, and will infuse a solution of what we call cardioplegia. That means heart arresting solution. That goes down the coronary arteries that perfuse the heart, and the heart stops. And then,
do you have to work? Is there a time limit on this thing? The
cardioplegia, depending on the protocol that the surgeon is trained in, the cardioplegia will be readministered at various times. Sometimes every 20 minutes, sometimes every 30, to replace the metabolic substrates for the heart and to.
So it's got in the metabolic substrates. You're talking like. Air and sugar, right? I mean,
glucose, amino acids, oxygen, and flushes out metabolic byproducts like carbon dioxide, lactic acid.
So you have to replace. You have to pump that stuff through.
And the heart is still alive.
Right.
It still is consuming oxygen. It still requires substrate. So the cardioplegia solution needs to be recycled every period of time, and that depends upon what sort of protocol the surgeon is using and what sort of cardioplegia system they use.
Wow. Okay. And then when they're done, when they get the hole sewn up or the whatever the valve fixed up or the whatever they do to that, and then they just pull, just reroute away from the bypass machine. And
the process of separating from bypass involves multiple steps, and one of the first thing is to get the heart back beating again. The surgeon removes the clamp from the aorta, and the heart is perfused with normal blood. What this does is it washes out the cardioplegia solution, which is usually an electrolyte solution that maintains depolarization of the heart. Uh-huh. So when you replace it with normal electrolytes, the heart resumes its normal electrical status, and slowly it will start to beat again. You then, as the heart starts to resume its function, you then have the heart take over more of its job, and you have less blood going to the pump, and you keep turning down the function of the pump, and you let the heart assume more and more of its load, and finally the pump is turned off and the heart is back where it used to.
Is that like a 45-second procedure, or like 10 minutes, or?
It depends. Most of the time it takes less than a minute,
wow.
Maybe 30 seconds or so. If you have a good repair and the heart's working fine, and the patient's in good metabolic state.
And then do you, like, over the course of the surgery, you're sitting there with the machine that has all the different meds on them to keep the sleep, the pain, the reflexes, and the respiration mm-hmm. all in the right thing. Do you have to turn those up and turn them down based upon things that you're seeing or not seeing, or do you is it on autopilot, or how's that work?
Well, you ask a lot of questions. So how does that work? Well, there are some drugs that are administered continuously during the course of the operation, and those are delivered by the IV line. There are some that are administered through the lungs, like the anesthetic gases. And of course, while the patient's on bypass, those go to the perfusionist. So that's the person who's operating the heart-lung machine. So they go into basically the artificial lung, and that's how they're administered during the case. And then, of course, there are the oxygen goes in and carbon dioxide goes out. So we have to start ventilating again once the patient comes off the bypass circuit. Um, there's a little transition when they move over to the bypass circuit, and there is another transition when the perfusionist, the bypass people.
No, is the perfusionist, is that an anesthesiologist as well? Is
No,
someone especially trained?
Yeah, the perfusionist is different. They are a person who's been trained by the. We have a school at my hospital where we train these people. The surgery department has an educational program where they train people to run the perfusion pump for these types of operations. It's a 2-year program. They're very highly trained. They're very, very specific for this type of thing. They know their thing. They know their field really well. They're great to work with.
All right. So do you see like miracle stuff happen?
Oh, every day I see things I can't explain. I'll put it that way. Every day I see patients that do great when I think that they may not, and every day I'm pleasantly surprised. And there are some days that I'm not, but not pleasantly surprised, but surprised in the other direction. But every day I see things that are beyond my understanding.
That's got to be like a really great feeling when you what do you call it? You reinfuse the heart with real blood, and you wash out the heart stopping goo, and that's what it's called, right? And you wash that out, and then it starts going again. That's got to be like.
Well, it is rewarding, but it's especially rewarding to know that you've played a role in the life of a child that now has a much better shot at life, and can go on to have a family and children of their own, and you've basically helped rebuild an entire branch on the tree of life, and that's a very, very rewarding thing.
That's a very poetic way to put that, which leads us to the perfect time at us in this episode for me to ask the question that I famously ask when we have people way smarter than me on the show, which is everybody, which is how do you want to tell our listeners, viewers, whoever they may be, how to seek the good and pursue their own adventure in life?
Say that again. I see you said seek the good.
Seek the good and pursue their own adventure in life. All the things you've learned, seen, done, what lesson can you distill to help them go seek the good and pursue the adventure of their own life?
Well, let me respond by quoting somebody who I admire very much, and that was Pope John Paul II. He said, "You need to find your mission. And your mission is where your passion meets the hunger of the world." So if you have a passion, what is your passion? Let's say it's motorcycle riding. Okay, let's say it's radio repair, or let's say it's something that can be very mundane. If that's your passion, find where it meets the hunger of the world, and that is your mission. According to Paul II, and I think that's probably the best way to put it. That's the best way to answer that question. Is that what
it does? That's it's your answer to that question, which makes it even better because it's special. It's something that showcases a part of your soul, of your personality into the world beyond just your academic achievements, your professional achievements, and your hobby-loric achievements. I'm going with hobby-loric.
Hobby-loric. I like hobby-loric. All right. That's
yes. But yeah, so Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. I learned a bunch of things that I knew nothing about, and apparently I knew some things about the stuff I knew nothing about. So that's like a double plus right there. Like that's like free brownies almost.
I'm impressed.
Thank you. But with all that said, I want to thank all of our listeners for listening. I want to go remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.